when it comes to CERN, there is a lot of conspiracy around it. There is a lot of concerns about it, some voiced by other venerable scientists. And I think I would like to kind of explain a little story about a previous technology which the same identical concern was made about, and that is the atomic bomb. Now, this is all about the Manhattan experiment and all of this kind of stuff. And, some of the scientists that were on there, Richard Feynman for one of them, I've researched, a lot of his work. I've watched all of his lectures. And, he is somebody that is a very empirical scientist. And, if you got to know him, you would see that, he's not really emotionally involved, with the subject matter. An empirical scientist is just about evidence. If you have an emotional relationship with any part of it, that's where biases come from. And this is what we're going to be aware of with our biases, because science is a process. It's a process of asking questions through experiments. And, just like, in essence, in some ways, the testing. We test something, the experiment is, well, does it work out in reality? Which gives us a calibration to our testing processes, or our intuition, or whatever that might be. So, when they developed the atomic bomb, theoretically, right, within the realms of atomic physics, in theory, if you set off an atomic reaction, the next reaction releases enough energy to cause another reaction. In fact, another at least 2 reactions, because its growth is exponential. This is why it reacts so violently, right? Because things are traveling at practically the speed of light, and if you multiply everything by 2 at that speed, then you get very rapid expansion. And that's what an explosion is. Yeah? And so if theoretically every nuclear reaction creates more energy, enough energy to create at least another 2 reactions, theoretically it would carry on until all matter in the entire universe had been destroyed. And this was the core philosophy of atomic physics. And several scientists basically said, look, if you set this off, there is a significant chance we could at least destroy the entire planet, but potentially the universe. And they went ahead and did it anyway. You see, there's many things. You've got to look at the eyes of the people that ultimately fund this. This is, it's the funders which you've got to really look for. And CERN's actually funded internationally. It's got money from all sorts of directions. But I do have the perspective that I don't feel man, especially in its current form, which is quite primitive, has the technical ability or access to the technology, if there is one, that could destroy the entire universe as we know it. And I'll elaborate on that, because one also theory or perspective about the multiverse theory is, so there's if you look at the multiverse theory, we've got 2 styles of multiverse. We have the external multiverse, the 3D multiverse, so to speak, which is that we have galaxies, right? We're in a galaxy called the Milky Way. We're in a solar system, and these are all, bits of stuff, particles, that have coalesced to form various, things which have gravity, and they're all gravitationally bound, and they're all beautifully acting in a map of of fluid dynamics. Everything is just it's a very beautiful liquid universe. That's where the superfluid theory comes from as well. That the universe is a superfluid. But it's like, some fluids move so slowly. Things like tar is a fluid, and it moves only like a few millimeter, a week, so you can't see it running, but it is. If you did a time lapse and speed it up, it would just look like water trickling down. So there's then the inner multiverse. So actually, I'll finish off explaining the outer multiverse. So we've got galaxies, and then we've got clusters, and then we've got, in essence, as far as we can see, we've got the cosmic radiation background, in all sides, and that's looking into the past. But if you expound upon that, on the other side of that is the other part of the Big Bang, which is what they're talking about with CERN, expanding towards the other side. So even though the universe is only something like 12 point something billion years old, if we look at the distance from one side of our universe to the other, based on what we can see, it would be something like 42 billion light years because of its expansion, and it's expanding beyond the horizon that we can see, which is the cosmic radiation background. Now, at some point, that goes to a void, which is the speculated void at the edge of the universe, which we are expanding into. So if we are expanding into something, that means we must be in a place of infinitesimal space. And in that infinitesimal space, we might have other universes which are like a bubble. So if you've got a room and you got one of those bubble machines and blew lots of bubbles, right? Each of those bubbles, if you envision as a universe, and in there it's got gazillions of galaxies, and in one of those galaxies it's got a solar system, and it's got a few people on there, right? This is size that we cannot conceptualize and put into any kind of meaningful scale in our minds. So there's the one concept is that basically it would pop our little bubble. It would destroy all matter within our little bubble. In essence, you cannot destroy matter. This is the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. What, in essence, it would potentially be is the bubble would collapse. Now, when a star collapses, it goes into supernova and it explodes and, expands, infinitesimally more. So if a universe collapses, potentially that's when it goes into another Big Bang, and it's just a recycling process. So the universe collapses, it'll go into another Big Bang, and then it'll go to a primordial universe, which is basically just, in essence, all these particles in a field of energy, and then those particles coalesce because they've got certain bonds and certain attractions that make up what they are, and they connect together in a certain way to create hydrogen, and then hydrogen collapses, turns into a star, and then creates all the elements that we know on our periodic scale. So to think that you could cause a reaction that could burst that bubble, you wouldn't destroy the multiverse, if there is one. Potentially you would destroy that bubble, but all it would do is reset it. And so yes, it would destroy everything in the entire universe as we know it, but it'd be instantly recreated as a rebirth. So you could even look at it a bit like when we die, if you believe in reincarnation, to be put back into meat, then you would then, the universe would be reborn. Now, one perspective of looking at it, because in Buddhism there is no good, there is no bad, everything just is, then if our consciousness is no death, no birth, they're an infinitesimal being in the cosmos, and we are everything because we create everything. It's our consciousness that is the universe. As Max Planck, the godfather of physics, who came up with what we call the Planck length, which is the shortest electromagnetic waveform that could possibly create any sort of energy. Also, Tesla was quoted as this as well. Nikola Tesla, the original guy, is consciousness is primary and fundamental. Everything in the universe comes from consciousness, not consciousness comes from the universe. I'll say it again. Consciousness is primary and fundamental. That means it's everything. Consciousness is everything. It's consciousness that creates the universe, not the other way around. We aren't born into the universe and our consciousness then, perceives the universe. We created what we are born into. We collapse the wave function. Yeah, we are the gods, in essence. So, to be reborn and re-enter into a new earth, it'd be instantaneous for us anyway, because time is non-linear in the fifth dimension. So the other perspective is on the inner multiverse, which is that a little bit like if you look at the Men in Black. Yeah, the Men in Black in essence encapsulate this. Or Horton Hears a Who. Yeah, if you want to go down that route, it is the smaller space, the as above so below, the fractal nature of the universe, and it's some perspectives is that each atom is a universe. Yeah, and it's created it's created mostly electromagnetics, which is the electrified universe theory. Everything that we perceive, this is what we call dark matter, is something that's not electromagnetic in nature. It's not light. Yeah, it's not a particle of light. We can't see it because we've only got electromagnetics, which create our universe. So that's the only thing that we've got to play with. Excuse me a second. So there's a belief that every time we collide, it's a stripped down hydrogen from proton from a hydrogen atom that is sent round. We destroy a universe, and what we're seeing is fragments of the universe coming out in the Hadron Collider. And in essence, what you've got to look at with the Hadron Collider, the easiest way to look at it is it's a super high-speed digital camera. Yeah, that's what it is. The big round thing, which is about 6-7 stories high, it's huge, which is the where they do the collisions, basically has sensors a little bit like what is in your camera, in your iPhone. Yeah. Or sensors in radiation, in doing X-rays or functional MRIs, or they're just plates that pick up different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. And what it does is there's lots of them in multi-layers of plates, all going out in all directions. And they're kind of sandwiched and layered. And what happens is if you could imagine, you throwing two rocks together at, 186,256,000 miles, per second, yeah, you're going to get a lot of fragments that come off it and dust, yeah, and if you ever spun a ball, it's what I think is it the Coriolis effect or something like that? I can't remember if that's the right name. That might be the water going down the plug hole or something. The ball will actually curve. Footballers use it, to curve it round things. Yeah. So these take often, kind of interesting trajectories following, different curves and parabolics. And because of the multiple plates, it can track that particle because it goes through them all, because they're subatomic particles. It's a bit like a plane flying through balloons. Yeah, if you had a big field of hot air balloons, but there was a nice big gap between the hot air balloons, you could fly a plane through. So that's what the subatomic particles are doing. They're going in between, or through, the matter of the thing. And that's what it's doing. It's just mapping out, what is inside an atom. Now, the concern about the black hole. So there's a little shrimp which can click its claws so quickly that it creates a vacuum pocket inside water, right? And then when that vacuum pocket collapses, it basically breaks the speed of sound and creates a supersonic bang. Yeah, and it uses it for stunning prey, right? But that tiny little vacuum of bubble, couldn't cause an explosion that could vaporize the sea. It vaporizes a very tiny fraction of water in the process. Yeah? So I give that analogy as a similar analogy to colliding these atoms together. They're not even atoms, they're just protons. And what happens is the black hole is so tiny, right? You've got to understand what creates a black hole that is sustainable. And that's the key word, is sustainable, right? And that is mass. It needs a certain amount of mass to sustain a black hole, right? Just like a sun needs a certain amount of mass, we call it critical mass. We need a certain amount of mass for, fusion to initiate, right? Now, if we look at Jupiter is a gas giant. In essence, Jupiter is a failed star. Yeah? If Jupiter was about 3 to 4 times bigger, it would ignite, or ignite's the wrong word, but it would, in essence, initiate fusion and become a star. Yeah? It is a volume of gas that creates gravity that presses the atoms at the center so tightly together they fuse, they join, right? And in that fusion and joining, you're changing bonds, the nuclear bonds and things like that. And it's like it's snapping from a magnet to the other. It suddenly changes polarity and grabs hold of some, and then sometimes things are ejected, and that's what we call radiation and light. Yeah, it's the waste material from that changing from, in essence, hydrogen to helium. Yeah, the next element on the periodic table. Now, then when a sun explodes, depending on its size, our sun will never explode and go into a black hole. It'll, go into probably a dense neutron star or something like that. You need a supermassive sun, or sometimes if several suns collide and join together, you can get to a critical mass where gravity itself is so high that light cannot escape. Yeah, gravity is so high light cannot escape. And that gravity then collapses and becomes what we now know as a black hole, right? We know something's there because we can see the gravitational influence, just like dark matter. Dark matter basically is something that has a gravitational influence we can see that influence, but we cannot see the physical matter in electromagnetics that is causing it. Yeah? So, to be able to get that level of gravitational force to sustain a black hole, you need the gravitational mass of, multiple stars, multiple supermassive stars, right? To put it this way, to give you an idea compared to our star, right? Our star is, 95 million miles away, right? And you could fit around about 960,000 Earths, just short of 1 million Earths, inside it. Yeah? Now, if you know Orion's belt, right, or Orion as the constellation, at the top left-hand shoulder is called Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, right? Betelgeuse is a supermassive red giant. It's about 360 light years away. In fact, it's probably already gone into supernova because it's actually bloating. It's on its final death row. Now, to give you an idea how big that star is if that star was in the center of our solar system and where our sun is, Earth would be halfway inside the star. It is twice the size of the Earth's orbit. You could fit about 2.4 quadrillion Earths in, yeah? Which is basically, if Earth was the size of a golf ball, you would fill the entirety, you would fit 3,000 Yankee stadiums full of golf balls, right? To fit in Betelgeuse. That's how big it is. Right, it is huge, and it's still not big enough to be big enough and small enough to be a black hole. So it's where the gravity occupies a small space. So when that goes into supernova, the chances are that will then collapse into a pretty big black hole, because the same amount of gravity that is taking up the size of twice the orbit of the Earth around our sun suddenly goes into a space about the size of a beach ball. Yeah? And it is that density which then causes the black hole, right? So the long and short of it is that there isn't very good supporting science that would suggest any black hole that's created at CERN could possibly decay and start swallowing up the Earth and, everything like that in that cartoon style way. It's just, it doesn't obey any physics that we understand. But there may be physics that we don't understand, and that's what they're concerned about, and all that kind of stuff. Now, it talks about gravitational waves and things like that. So when you collapse a black hole, you're creating an incredibly, highly dense pocket of gravity, which creates a gravity wave. And if you understand Einstein's Rosenbridge theory, which is time and space and gravity are all interlinked. So, in essence, if you imagine space like a sponge, like a huge, massive sponge, right? Now, if you just, let's say, pictured me stood in front of you, and there's 5 meters in between us. And that 5 meters is one big sponge. Now, if I could squash that sponge and compress that sponge so it was only, let's say, 1 inch thick, well, I can move that inch a lot quicker than I can move the 5 meters, yeah? So if I've compressed the space between us and I just step across and then space expands behind me, and this in essence is kind of what warp drive is talking about. It's, it's creating a pocket of super dense gravity, which basically compresses space in front of you, which allows you to not break the law of traveling faster than the speed of light, but it would appear so because you are compressing space in between. Yeah, if that makes sense at all. So this comes down to the relation of time to gravity, right? And this kind of links with what some people talk about as the Mandela effect, which is, kind of interesting, which has got many kind of dimensions to it, pun intended. So it is known and understood that gravity speeds up or slows down time, right? The closer you are to a mass of gravity, the slower the time goes. Yeah, the further away. The other way around. The faster the time goes. Further away, slower the time goes. Now, we know this very, very, detailed because of atomic clocks that we use on satellites. Now, satellites orbit the Earth quite a distance away. Now, when you measure something's density in a sphere, if you double the size of the sphere, you times the volume by 8, and if anything's divisible by volume, then you will actually lose a factor of 8, for every time you double the circumference around the objects. So to be able to have GPS, what we have to do is very accurately synchronize these things. So they had to create a clock which could measure time down to a very small fragment. So atomic clocks are what they created, because atoms of certain radiation, certain energy intensities, they give off what we know as radiation. Everything gives off radiation in some form or another. Now, radiation is just photons, it's light. It's a bandwidth of light that we can't see with our physical eyes, but we can create sensors that can detect it. It just detects every time, the amplitude of the wave changes, from a positive to a negative. And that is 1 cycle per second, and we can measure those cycles. It's like every photon that's hitting it. So if they measure every photon, and this radioactive decay gives off 8 billion photons every second, and we can count the photons, that means we can then deduce time down to 8 billionth of a second. That's an incredibly accurate clock. And we need these because I can't remember this figure. It's something like 17 seconds or something like that, either per day or something like that, that GPS clock in the satellite against the clock on Earth would be different. That is the amount of difference in time. I should Google this and get the correct, and just kind of put that in the memory bank. It's decades ago since I learned this. So what they need to do is be able to adjust it and measure that time accurately, because it'd be something like, I think it was something like 50 meters a day or something like that as well. You can Google it. There's the exact figures. Don't quote me on that. But there's a significant amount that your GPS would be out if these clocks weren't more carefully synchronized, if they were just left to keep the original time. And so gravity speeds up time. And this is one of the theories about why consciousness on the planet is accelerating. Because we're moving into a denser part of the universe, a part that's got more dark matter, right? And it's accelerating time at an exponential rate. And this is why consciousness, where technologies and everything has been shifting. There's the rate of growth that is predicted in an exponential curve. 95% of the growth is done in the last 5% of the time frame. So what that would predicate is that in the next 20 years, we're going to get the same amount of growth technologically, evolutionarily, and spiritually that we have in the last 380 years. And, this is why I believe that we're going to see a massive shift of consciousness. It's been predicted for thousands of years. This has been predicted in the Mayan shift and all this kind of stuff, of the shift of consciousness into the higher earth, into the new realm. If you know anything about Dolores Cannon, about the splitting of the earths. And that is also written in ancient scriptures, that it'll be the light and the darkness will split. We've actually been two earths that have been coexisting at different realms ever since. And that's what you've got to look at, the fractal nature of consciousness and the multidimensional part of consciousness, which is there's an infinite number of realities all playing out at the same time. And you may be able to navigate through consciousness into each one, but you don't notice you're navigating because the changes are very subtle, right? There's a lot of similarity, yeah? But sometimes we might go into, so if you've just seen the latest Marvel as well, Doctor Strange, when they're diving into this multiverse type thing, right? You may have gone to another dimension, so your consciousness is transmuted to another physical form. Part of the evolution of consciousness the Mayan talked about and why it would go is because we can reincarnate without death, right? So we can reincarnate with the physical form without dying, and this is, spiritual transmutation. And this is what the Egyptians did with the pyramids and things like that, is some suspicion there. So, in essence, you may go to a different dimension, and you can do this through various portals, as in sleep is a portal, yeah? Psychedelics are portals, right? Transcendental meditations are portals, okay? So you could interdimensionally swap places with another you, and in that new reality, there are subtle differences, things that were there before and not here now. And this is what we call the Mandela effect, yeah? Now, the other thing that could potentially create these, disturbances in the field, yeah, break the space-time continuum, would be things like, black holes, right? There is suspicion that black holes are portals, maybe stargates, to other universes, yeah? But obviously, to be able to get to our nearest black hole, there's a few floating around that are quite small, but our one is right at the centre of our universe. There's a supermassive black hole there. We know it's there. We've actually tracked and measured the trajectories of stars that are very close orbits to it. Some of them stars are moving, close to the speed of light, because it's that slingshot effect. And the closer, it's like how the ice skater starts to spin with their arms out, and as they bring their arms in, they spin faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So an object's orbit round something of high gravitational force, because it's a constant falling action, to stop it from falling in, it's got to orbit at the same velocity. So to orbit the Earth, you need to be 17,500 miles per hour to be able to go into orbit. And that speed changes depending on what, height is the orbit. So these gravitational pulses from the Hadron Collider could potentially cause ripples in time and space, which may or may not be construed as you jumping into a different dimension through a portal into another one of your avatars, yeah? And that particular avatar and that experience might... The challenge with the human consciousness is it's on the most part quite fragile. And ego is one of the biggest challenges that consciousness has in evolving and seeing beyond the veil, yeah, the veil of perception, the doors of perception, which is why the band The Doors was called The Doors. It's all about consciousness. And they did some of their songs in Pythagorean tuning, 432 hertz a day. So they knew. So these windows or doors that we go through, it's like psychedelic experiences. Ayahuasca, there's some conspiracy theories that ayahuasca, the plant medicine, is a frequency of consciousness of another beings in another galaxy or another universe or another metaverse or whatever it is. And what they're doing is they're using that plant medicine to transport and swap consciousnesses with humans for their lower vibrational world that they're in. So in essence, that they're being reborn in you, you're being reborn in them, and you're swapping places. But your experience is that nothing changes for you because your perception is there, and you gain the perception. It's the soul that changes, and you've got to kind of strip down to what is you, what you think is you, what is the perception of you, which is a big part of the psychology of identity. This is in essence, enlightenment is getting rid of your identity. This is why monks shave their heads, they wear the same robe, because if you have a hairstyle or you have a style of clothing, then you start to have an identity, right? And if you identify with something, that's ego. Yeah, everything's story. This is the irony mostly of people that are super spiritual, because they're identifying as being spiritual, which is the epitome of ego, which is therefore not spiritual. And there is the real irony of being a spiritual person, right? The fact you identify as that, right, is counterproductive, it counterreacts it. So to be able to change and create change, right, or shift portals, go and be the avatar that's living the life that you want to live, what you have to do is shift your psychology, shift your perception, shift your behaviors, shift how you act and react and respond and behave, and how you charm, and the ideas that you have and the inspiration that you have, right, and your propensity to follow those inspirational thoughts, because that is in manifestation. That is action. We have to take action. The last 6 letters of the law of attraction is action. We don't get anything without doing anything. Yeah, but when the change is so significant, it creates massive cognitive dissonance and conflict. Then often trauma happens, and that trauma can put you in a psychological institution, or it can kill you or lead you to kill yourself, because your concept reality have changed in such a significant manner that you cannot cope with the new reality. Yeah. And again, that is a potential of being reincarnated into a different body, going through a portal into a different multiverse, experiencing that new experience. There's no difference in transition for you, because the portal was going down that experience, whether it's that transcendental meditation or the psychedelic experience, or doing ayahuasca or bufo or DMT of other forms, or intramuscular ketamine or mushrooms or anything like this. They are all, again, this is quoting Einstein and Tesla and everything like that. They say if you want to understand how the universe works, think along the lines of frequency, vibration, and wavelength. Yeah, everything is vibrating, nothing is at rest. These are the principles, the Hermetic principles, and everything like that. Right? It's been written in the scriptures ad infinitum, and all psychedelics are piezoelectric crystals. Yeah, lysergic acid diethylamide is a crystal. Ketamine is a crystal. DMT is a crystal, right? Psilocybin is a crystal. Tetrahydrocannabinol is a crystal, right? And they're all oscillators, piezoelectric crystals, which resonate at a certain frequency, and that frequency is a level of consciousness. It's a level of reality. It's a perceptional reality. Yeah, it is a portal into a different dimension. It's a different dimension. Is your vibration shifts, and your vibration, adopts the frequency of the medicine, and therefore taps you into that different frequency of consciousness, that different awareness, right? Now, whether the stimulation of the pineal gland, which is a very interesting gland, because it is an eye, it's about the size of a grain of rice. It's a fluid-filled sac, and inside the sac, it is lined with rods and cones, and similar to what's in the eye. So it is actually a light receptor. It is an eye, and in all intents of the purposes, and it's an eye that produces certain chemicals which break down into dimethyltryptamine, DMT. Which is again a piezoelectric crystal, which is known as the God, molecule, right? Because people feel that it is, connection to the divine. And in fact, there's some interesting science around that, as we've had evidence of, in essence, your life force energy leaving the body under DMT and then coming back when you land, which is quite fascinating. It was done with using biophotons and biophototic, technology and stuff. But anyway, I digress a little. So the Mandela effect, in essence, could be you navigating these portals into different dimensions, and that could be with a death of the ego. Yeah, a death of the ego, in essence, is a rebirth. So when you do self-development and you transform yourself into a different person, potentially that also is a portal that you're not actually this person changing, but you're changing from the reality that was the old person into the reality where that person already is. That's why it's so natural when you do shift and change. Yeah? But in that reality, right, the McDonald's that was on the corner of this actually might not be there in this one. Yeah? The video of Trump talking about how if he went for presidency, he'd be Republican because all Republicans are morons and they'd vote for whatever he says, right? If you Google that, that video does not exist. In fact, the video never existed. It was a news article that was written in some paper or something, which was a conspiracy theory and a kind of a broken telephone set of conspiracies. But I can 100% guarantee that that video exists because I watched it 20 times, giggling my head off, and shared it on Facebook because I found it hilarious, because it just typified who he was, right? I remember watching it, as I say, 20 times in a row because I just found it hilarious, right? Because it was just him. This is what we call the Mandela effect, yeah? Where something in that reality is no longer in this reality. Now, another argument could be that that video would have been very damaging for him, and I know for a fact the internet can be cleansed. Yep, I know actually people that do it for a fee. They can cleanse your entire identity from the internet, right? And any content that you ever had. And so if you think somebody with the resources of those kind of caliber of people, of course they can. In fact, I watched a series of YouTubes from a doctor in Africa talking about how the polio vaccine that they were, the Vaccinate Africa campaign that Bill Gates did, right? Well, she was reporting that she was taking taking vials, samples to an independent lab, and 1 in 3 of the vials had a chemical neutering agent in it, which would render the person vaccinated sterile, unable to have babies. So, yeah, the guy whose parents, who created Planned Parenthood, the eugenics family, caught putting sterilizing, things into vaccines, right, and got caught doing it. I saw that. I watched it in real time, and then, overnight, she disappeared, all the videos disappeared, all the newspaper articles disappeared, and everything disappeared, and that was it. And, again, that's the Mandela effect. Is that the Mandela effect? Or is that very clever people with incredible resources utilizing those to shape people's perceptions and reality accordingly? I think that is a very plausible explanation of that. Although, again, I've known personal friends that, have gone back to places, and where buildings were, they're not anymore, and where a building wasn't is a building that is old. And they haven't been able to explain that in their realities. So, yeah, this is potentially the area that people are talking about CERN opening up portals. Now, again, we all have the ability to open up a portal, right? In fact, and this is something that I researched very heavily, and I have personal experience with when we're talking about entities, right? And the other way of describing what we know as or call as an entity is shared consciousness, right? What I mean by shared consciousness is, if you understand that the body, your consciousness does not reside in the physical body. Yeah? It's too vast, too great, it resides in everything, right? It's non-linear, non-local, and, is on the other side of the veil, right? It doesn't actively, reside in this realm, right? This is some of the experiments around DMT is kind of shown as well. And this is why they call DMT a death without dying, yeah? In essence, you take your VR goggles off and you see where you are in reality, yeah? This is what we are. We're in a virtual reality, an electromagnetic rainbow world, right? A hologram, virtual reality, which is directly correlative to our emotions, right? Our emotions control it. This is the first law of quantum physics. Nothing is unaffected by the observer, yeah? And if nothing is unaffected by the observer, that means the observer, which is us, affects everything that we see. And this is the particle wave duality, the collapse of the wave function, right? The moment we perceive something is the moment that the light that was in superposition and in a probability field, in other words, it didn't exist in a physical reality, it changes instantaneously into a physical reality of a particle, which is what our eyes detect. Yeah? That is the scientific process of how we create this reality. It's in theory, inside of your wardrobe doesn't exist until you open it and observe it. Instantly, as you open it, you collapse the wave function, and inside is what you expect there to be. It's your perception. Your perception drives your reality. So because you have a belief, because yesterday you put a shirt in there and, you've looked at it several times, you've already got mapped out a perception of the inside of it. So instantly when you open it, that reality is recreated. Yeah? So this is the consciousness and, how we create reality in a kind of, it's like in a video game, right? Only the scene that you're in is being rendered. Yeah, that's probably one of the best ones when if you ever played those video games where you're running through and everything like that. They only render the bit you can see in the area you are and the direction you're looking. Right? Everything else is not on a screen, so it's not rendered. Right? It's only when you turn the person in the screen round that it renders it slowly as you rotate. Because the amount of, computing power to render the whole, kind of world that you're in at the same time all at once is ridiculous. But it's not. It doesn't. You don't need it. Yeah. And this is where it comes down to consciousness. Does the world exist? Right? Does anything outside, this is the Descartes, I think, therefore I am. The only perception of reality that you have is the experience that you're having right now. The experience that you're having right now is that you are in some location, you are wearing clothes of some sort, you will identify as some sort of gender, right? You will have and identify as your origin of birth, and the education that you've had, and the experience and everything like that. That's ego, right? That is not you. That is the perception you have of you because you've gained ownership of that through direct experience. Yeah? Or a perception of direct experience, right? This is what the Matrix is all about, right? is what is reality. We think we touch somebody, but we're not. The electrons in our hand are repelling the electrons in their skin, right? We're not physically touching, right? That is a perception because we cannot conceive the infinitely small gap of the electron forces. So therefore, in our reality, we're touching them. We're not. We're levitating off the floor in reality. Yeah, and we're made of light. In fact, 10 to the minus 27 of us is nothing but vacuum. Yeah, there's more space in between our subatomic particles than there are in our celestial bodies that we see by a magnitude of about 100. Yeah, so it's 93 million miles to the sun. We've got two celestial bodies, Venus and Mercury, in between, right? And this is how things like, comets can come in and out of the, solar system and be pulled around gravitationally, but not touch anything, because the gaps are huge, right? And the nearest star is like a light year away, which is how long light takes in a year to get there, and it travels 189,256,000 miles per second, right? So it's a long bloody way away. Yeah. So when we look at what we're made of practically nothing. And this is what the CERN Collider is all about, is we're practically made of nothing, right? But what are we made of and how does it operate? Now, what could they get from that? What would be the application to warrant such investment and investigation? Now, I mean, a scientist will say, just to further our understanding of the universe, yeah? And it has been the furthering our understanding of the universe and our environment and chemicals and reactions and things like that, which is what we call technology. Yeah, we wouldn't have the device that we are listening on if it wasn't for scientific exploration and a human's, desire and, need for expansion. Yeah, we're all wanting to expand. We're all wanting to develop. We're all wanting to grow in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, and growth is often a destructive process. Psychological growth is destroying the old perceptions of yourself and creating new ones. Yeah, and it's a process, and it's a scientific process. I'll try this. Does it work? No, it doesn't. I'm just worse. Okay, we'll try something new. Oh, that does work. Great. I'll do more of that. Yeah, and so the evolution of science is to explore, is to we're talking about Elon Musk. Why do we want to go and, go to Mars, right? Why don't we fix the planet that we're on? Well, why is that his fault? Why can't somebody else fix the planet that we're on while he figures out how to go to Mars? We don't look at the concept that we can do all of it, right? We just need more benevolent leaders with money, which I've got interest in impact rather than, profit. It's profit which destroys the planet in reality. It's moving into the new level of consciousness, the collaborative future, the Burning Man philosophy, the new wave of beings, which is the indigo children, all of these, the waves of conscious beings when you're talking about Dolores Cannon, the Guan Yin prophecy, which is the Guan Yin moving into the age of compassion, which is the golden era, which is the Mayan prophecy, the end of the long count, which is the going into the feminine energy, going from the masculine, it's a different polarity shift of consciousness. And, as we go into that, that's what we're going to change. But this is the splitting of the earths, the lower realm and the higher realm. So this is where ultimately there is no consequence to the enlightened ones, because when we're enlightened we realize that we're light and we can choose which frequency of light that we follow, whether it's the darkness, whether it's the higher frequency of light. And this is the splitting of the two consciousnesses of earth. So the Luciferians, the one that want the end of the world, the Illuminati that believe that they're going to pollute and destroy the planet to the point of reducing the population, and they've got places where they're going to go hide in the underworld, under mountains, because there's going to be electromagnetic storm and this, that, and the other. There's all sorts of theories of all sorts of things. Not all of them are going to happen because timeline shifts. And this has been observed with various remote viewing experiments. One of my friends, Stefan Schwartz, the guy who actually got the Siberian Blue off, he did an experiment about 40 years ago called the 2040 Project, right? And what they did is he got, it's one of the most prolific researchers in remote viewing. I'm going to get him interviewed again sometime soon. And because he's doing now what we call the 2060 Project. It's a follow-on, 40 years later. And what they did is he got hundreds of remote viewers, that he'd done all sorts of different experiments with. He's done 23,000 very well-documented experiments, some with the military, in remote viewing, right? It's a recognized phenomenon. There's no ambiguity. And these remote viewers, in essence, predicted things like, for example, the fall of the Berlin Wall 15 years before it happened to the day. They also predicted the fall of the Soviet Union 20 years before it happened to the month. Yep. And this was like, what? The Soviet Union is going to collapse? This was in the middle of its height of power and everything like that, right? It was like unheard of. Now, it predicted all sorts of other events that happened, and but one thing that shifted that was 9/11, right? After 9/11, a lot of the predictions seemed to not come true. It's as if that shifted the timeline, right? And that's another interesting rabbit hole when we're talking about the Mandela effect or shifting of consciousness and things like that, right? And again, some perspective on maybe the darker perspective of the Hadron Collider, right? And this comes down into things like the power of eight, or Lynn McTaggart's work about focused or intentional consciousness, focused awareness, right? And what we call the Maharishi effect, where, when the Maharishi got 3,000 of the, spiritual leaders to focus on peace in India, that weekend, all the wars throughout India stopped, right? And that's why they call it the Mandela effect. The Maharishi effect, because the Maharishi, they prayed for peace and got peace as a direct correlative result. Yeah. Now, Lynn McTaggart's had some kind of interesting results when she's been attempting to do similar things with certain wars. One seemed to actually get a little bit worse at first. So it's kind of fun. They seem to have redirected also weather patterns, tornadoes and things like that, or hurricanes. And this is what the ancient Indians did with the rain dance. They believed that if they went, and they were dancing in the rain, they weren't praying for rain, they were dancing as if they were in the rain, they're stamping in the puddles and feeling the rain on their faces, and then it would rain. Yeah, because we collapse the wave function, we create our reality. So if we convince ourselves, to a degree that something is real, then it becomes reality. Yeah, and all of this is in the Bible and the Quran, and written in all various scriptures and everything. You can take quotes out of everywhere talking about this. This is the law of attraction, and I've kind of actually done this on a low level, myself. And demonstrated it, which freaked people out, in creating clouds in blue skies, right, and focusing on points with multiple people. So at the end of the day, a lot of conspiracy theory is the darker element of the Hadron Collider. Oh, it's going to bring about doom, and it's a bit like Ghostbusters. They're going to enter this portal, and all the demons are going to rush back, and it's that kind of Armageddon, biblical, is it apocryphy or something like that? I think, is that the right word? Something like that. Where in reality, if you're in the light and reside in the light, you will not have that experience. They may have that experience and split into that separate alternate dimension where there is a world that goes down that route, but there's also a world that splits off in the other direction and goes with the light, and we go into the beautiful, the amazing, all war has ended. We have political systems that operate for the benefit of humanity. We have manufacturing systems that aren't competitive, so we don't have to cut corners, and we don't have to make things that only last a year, like the warranty, or we don't have to pollute the planet because it's expensive to do the right thing, right? When we don't have to pay for it, we can just do everything properly. Yeah, we can make things that last. We can share technology, and we can reduce our impact, right? And we can just create magic. Look at the Venus project, and things like that. These are all maps of these types of things, and I know a lot of people that are actually working on this. I do have the benefit of being in a quite interesting network of people, and they're looking at changing political systems. I'm looking at creating political systems using, a somatic response to tap into our inner knowing and see if we can actually create a technology which can connect to source and ask source a question and it happen in reality. I think that is a highly potential thing to do. Yeah. So there is the dark, there is the light, there is always that polarity. That's the yin and the yang. And you will choose the path through your frequency of vibration, and you will have that experience through that. So there's nothing to worry about, because worry is the lower frequency, and the worry is what will manifest that reality. We don't get what we want out of life, we get what we expect. It's our expectation that drives our Mandela, so to speak. So, I think, that was since I pressed record, it was 1 hour, 1 minute and 1 second when I looked at it. So I think the download's finished. If you got any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
That pretty much covered everything for me. I enjoyed listening to that. I don't really have any questions.
Thank you. Anybody else? Because my fiance is vying for my attention, so.
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Did anybody learn anything?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you for joining me for this quick download and my little kind of tirade. I didn't know where that hour went. I thought it'd only been about 15 minutes. Time dilation. Right, thank you very much. I love you all, and I will speak to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.